Okay, guys, we're going to start. Yeah, we will. All right, so by the way, before we start, how did you like Marcel's presentation? Is that good? Good, good. Okay, you learned a lot from that? Awesome. Great. Okay, so standing next to me is Leah Chung, one of my students from how many years ago?
2014.
2014, so not too long ago. Wow, okay. And so Leah is unique in that she took what she learned at RISD, an art and design school, and even when she was a student, she was very passionate about taking that design process that you guys are all experts on now and applying it to social problems or to create social change or improve things socially or economically. So she left RISD and is now working for USAID, which is a part of the U.S. government, working on social issues. And she's a big design voice in a place that usually has none. So let's give her a big welcome and thank you for coming.
Hey guys, can you guys in the back hear me okay? Great, just let me know. I'm really excited to be here. As Matt said, I did the MIT RISD studio like 2 years ago, so it's really cool to be back on this campus. And I hear you guys are absolutely awesome, so really, really honored to be here. My name's Leah, and I work at the USAID agency. It's the U.S. International Development Agency, and it's an official federal, it's part of the federal government, and it's the arm that takes care of the foreign aid that comes from taxpayer money, your money, my money. It's about 1% of taxpayer money, and it goes towards ending extreme poverty in developing countries all over the world and promoting democratic societies. And we were founded in '61 by the JFK administration, and our budget is about $38 billion. That sounds like a lot, and again, it's 1%, so don't worry. And we do short-term and long-term development. Short-term meaning a lot of disaster relief. So in the West Africa Ebola outbreak, we were responding on behalf of the government, the US government, to send medical teams over, build medical centers, send over medical supplies. So that's sort of what we do in the short-term development. And we do long-term development as well, and that's about building infrastructure like agriculture, healthcare, and other infrastructure to promote democratic societies. So it's sort of the two things we do, but it's very broad. And I'll get into what exactly I do at USAID a little later. So today I'm here to talk about social design, and particularly my personal struggle and semi-triumph as I took the almost non-existent path to be a social designer. And I'll talk a little bit about international development and design and how those two intersect a little later.
It's hard to do this backwards. Can you do that?
Yeah.
You can just
And
press
now
stop
you
and
can-
it'll work. You don't have to test it.
Just click the red, hit the red circle. Beautiful. And now you got the clicker here.
Ooh. Cool. All right. So, social design. Does anyone have an idea what that may be? Not based on this. Anyone? No? All right. Well, some people say it's design that empowers marginalized groups. For me, it's considerate design that isn't always sexy and isn't always a physical product. And social design really covers a lot. In the US, social design hasn't caught on 100%, but there are some universities that have master's programs in social design, and they all believe that complex social problems require creative problem solvers. So this is just some of the social design examples. It's really a broad range. You have these kind of installation posters by Korean graphic designer Lee Jae-suk. And this is an example of how social commentary can even be social design. And you have the OXO example. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this, but you may think, how does a kitchen utensil relate to social design? This was created by Sam Farber. He's a veteran in the kitchen business, kitchenware business. And one day he saw his wife, Betsy, struggling with a metal vegetable peeler. So he got inspired by that and went ahead and designed this ergonomic line of kitchen utensils that could not only be used by people suffering from arthritis, but everyone else. So this is a really good example of universal design that's good for people who may be ignored in the market, but it also applies to everyone else. Even storybooks like this, called I Love My Hair, right? This is using art and design to help kids see themselves in storybooks and helping them accept who they are. You know, this is a big issue in the Black community where kids grow up reading books where, you know, the characters are blonde hair, blue-eyed characters, and that's all they see. So they have insecurities about their hair. This is definitely one example. Even this could be an example. Recognizing the needs of a user group and building a system to support those needs is social design, essentially. So Victor Papanek says, you know, to define social design is really to define design. He says, in an age of mass production, when everything must be planned and designed, design has become the most powerful tool with which man shapes his tools and environments, and by extension, society and himself. So I got into social design because I grew up seeing pictures like this. It's really sad. It's taken by Kevin Carter during the 1993 famine in Sudan. It's called Vulture and Child. And I saw, you know, famine and disaster all over the world. And as a young girl, I just wanted to help out, right? You all kind of do the clothing drives and do 30-hour famine. You don't eat in the gym for 30 hours, that kind of thing. And back in high school, you know, the only way I found that I could contribute my skills to help with these issues was making T-shirts. And that was kind of, you know, I was the go-to person. If we were fundraising on the Darfur genocide, you know, I'd be the one to make the T-shirts, sell them for profit. So this is the little way I try to help. Looking back, it's kind of funny because, you know, you see these two Darfur T-shirts. One says Save Darfur, the other says Dance for Darfur, because we had a school dance to fundraise for it. Kind of sounds ridiculous now, but back then that's kind of, you know, all I could do. This is me in the winter in Providence selling T-shirts to fundraise for child soldiers in Uganda that had been rehabilitated. So this was kind of my jam. And so in college, there wasn't a distinct path towards social design. It's not like there was a class called, you know, how to be a social designer in 12 steps. So I really had to build my own curriculum. And Matt definitely helped me out with that too. I took product development and entrepreneurship classes at RISD, and that's where I got a hold of applying the design process to different issues, whether they're social or not. I took classes from Brown University right up the hill, and that's where I studied post-colonial Africa and international development from the perspective of African writers and scholars. And that's also when I realized Western aid workers may not have any reason to be in these developing countries trying to help. And at one point I actually withdrew from RISD to study international relations at Georgetown for a semester. And it was awesome. Like, I could talk about the Israeli-Palestine conflict in hallways with my friend from West Bank, and that'd be great. I really missed that from RISD. But you know, there was a time in class where we would talk intensely about the Arab Spring, going back and forth, And we're just sharing our opinions. We're getting really intense and riled up. And 6 p.m. hit, and the class was over, and we got dismissed. That intense conversation sort of just died as soon as the school bell rang. So for me, that was kind of disappointing. You know, like we talk about these issues, then so what? What do we do with them? So that's where I thought that, hey, like design is all about action and putting your ideas and your words into a physical prototype and a solution. So that's really when I got into the idea of applying design to these very complex social, economic, and political problems. So before I explain what kind of work I do at USAID, I'll demonstrate what international development can often look like. In international development, there's an inevitable power at play. You know, sure, you're trying to help other countries develop, but there really is a power dynamic in helping anyone, and that can often manifest in a very patronizing way. Those who are being helped are seldom listened to, and they often do not have a seat at the table of their own development. So this is a classic example of that. Anyone heard of the play pump? It's like that, one person. Okay, Sophia, of course. Okay, great. So it looks like this. It's a merry-go-round or roundabout mechanism you find in playgrounds. The idea was that children would spin on this, and you would harness that kinetic energy to draw water out of the ground. So this is the more technical diagram, but you know, step one, children would turn, and then water would be drawn out. It would be stored in that tank over there, and then when you turn on the faucet on the other end, you just get water, right? And traditionally what happens is women in villages in sub-Saharan Africa would use those hand pumps, right? You've seen those before. They'd carry like 40-liter jerry cans and go to these boreholes, and that's how they would get their daily supply. So one thing to emphasize is that the water tank over there, it was supposed to have these billboards, and those would be for selling ad space, and the idea was that you would use the ad revenue from that to kind of maintain the water system. So it was like a neat, you know, idealistic idea. This guy, Trevor Field, he's an ad executive from South Africa, and one day he was at an agricultural fair, and he saw this invention. It was by a South African engineer named Ronnie Stuber. And so Trevor Field saw this. He's like, amazing idea. I need to apply this and, you know, install it in every corner of sub-Saharan Africa, and it's going to save millions of lives. So he took this and really sold it. PBS did a documentary on this. Amy Costello, the reporter, did a short piece where she publicized the success of this. It was really great. Who wouldn't, you know, want to invest in these guys and donate money to have children have fun? And it was really marketable and brandable, which is why it got $16.4 million in donor funding. $10 million from the government, $5 million from the Case Foundation, and $1.4 million from the MCJ Foundation. And Jay-Z got involved, you know, that's a big deal. He was the Water for Life ambassador. That was a water campaign to raise awareness and money about the water crisis all over the world. And he even got behind play pumps and donated his concert funds to install play pumps. So this was a big deal. Other celebrities got involved. And there was actually a partnership with Save the Children, where they were going to partner with Play Pump International, which it was now an NGO, and they were supposed to install 80 play pumps in Mozambique. So it was supposed to be this big installation. And 3 years later, Amy Costello, the same reporter who reported on the success of play pumps, she went back 3 years later, and the plan was 80 play pumps. In reality, she only accounted for 42, and of those 42, only 13 were functioning. That's crazy, right? And this is an example of, it's a really sad video because it just shows the absolute failure and disregard for the end user. So we'll watch this really briefly.
With no water in the tank, one group of children has to spin in order for others to drink. The play pump was supposed to be fun, but this looks like work. And when the water finally comes, the kids battle over it. I decided to visit more play pump sites. The next one was in a more remote part of Mozambique, with not nearly as many children around. I'd heard this village used to get its water from a hand pump, but then some people arrived to install a play pump.
When the play pump came, were you expecting it? Had anybody told you that we'd like to bring a play pump to this community?
Não tivemos informação, só que vieram deixar o quê? Pedras, aquele tanque, depois a secretária pediu para nós virmos tirar a água naquela bomba.
Regina showed me how she managed to use the pump, which was designed for children. But she's young.
Mas já, aquelas velhas, onde consegui?
You can't use it. Can you use it?
Não consegue. Ela fez voa, não ia, não voa. Se ele ia, não ia. Vai assim, então. Mas já quando tiver a água, eu vou deixar aquela.
And these women have a bigger problem. Regina says this play pump hasn't produced any water for 6 months.
Any reactions? Firsthand, anyone want to share their absolute disgust? Sure, back there.
I mean, it's kind of incredible to design it for, well, one, that you would just go in and put it in a place without talking to them at all.
Right.
That's incredible.
It's pretty rude. Anyone else? Matt?
I get upset because it seems like a lot of these projects are really designed to make some, designer or academic, famous,
Right.
as opposed to actually help people.
Yep.
And it also makes me pretty worried about how much traction it gained at the beginning and
Right.
how poorly the entire implementation of that went. Both from maybe that wasn't really meeting the community to begin with, and also that it wasn't installed properly or just didn't work.
I feel there's a bigger repercussion because of projects like this, because when you actually want to go back to the community and work with them, help them, there's a huge denial from the community because of previous experiences,
Right.
which helps really work intended with the right mindset of people to make it happen.
Sophia, did you have your hand?
I was just going to mention the ice bucket challenge is kind of like that, where
Right.
it's more about the people donating and supporting financially than the people who are benefiting from the grant.
Right, exactly. So this is a typical example of when you design for as opposed to with, and it's an easy trap to fall into. One of the most dangerous phrases is, first, the lesson is, just because your end user is poor and powerless, it doesn't mean that their needs and wants shouldn't be considered. Why design a kitchen utensil that, is really attentive to the user need, but all of a sudden when it's about social issues, you totally just disregard your process. Why do that, right? And this is one of the most dangerous phrases in my opinion, in development especially. This is going to change the world, or this is going to save the world. Behind these phrases, there is a narrative behind it that's this is a sweeping phrase that glamorizes the physical object or person that's doing the changing or doing the saving, right? And it disregards the people who are being changed. And of course we should dream big, but behind this phrase, there's a very big patronizing attitude embedded, and a deeply ingrained savior complex. And I was just like this when, in high school, I was trying to help, and, I was fundraising for child soldiers and making t-shirts. I was like, yes, we just need to help them. I even went to Uganda to help child soldiers rehabilitate in northern Uganda, and yeah, I honestly, looking back, don't know what value I had. You know, I wasn't a trained rehabilitation expert in child soldiers. Like, what was I doing there, right? And every year there's, you know, thousands of gap year students that go over to these countries thinking that they can change the world, or, you know, go in unknowingly, that there are so many complex political and social implications in these situations. And I'm sure Trevor Field, you know, he thought he could change the world with this, and he just assumed that he could go into these villages. So a common theme in development is listening, the ear. It may sound sappy, but essentially listening in development is just like user research. It's really easy to talk about, but hard to do. And in development, this is especially true. And in the work that I do, it's really about how do we listen better. So I'll talk a bit about the structure of USAID. Don't look up the organizational chart on the website, it's a hot mess. And this is a simplified version, but you know, there's Congress, right? They get the money from the taxpayers. They allocate with the 1% of the federal budget to USAID Washington. We have to sort of request it every year. And so USAID Washington, the headquarters in DC, that's where I am. And we're essentially like fund managers. And we provide technical support overseas. But we have USAID missions, and this is a fancy word for like USAID branch offices in the developing countries that we work in. So there are several of these, and then, so DC funds these missions for various programs, and then the missions implement the programs on the ground, and that trickles down to the local organizations who have a better understanding of the local context, and then that trickles down to constituents, which are the actual like end users of development, the ones being helped. And so I was hired for a program called Local Works, and the budget is $45 million. It was launched last year, and the basic premise of this is that, you know, the local community knows better. You know, Washington, DC people shouldn't go in there and say, hey, like, we know how to develop your country. It doesn't work that way. So that's the sort of context of why this Local Works program came about. And to show it in this pyramid diagram, traditionally, this is what development looks like. You have the big donor up top, and if you were to parallel this to the play pump example, the donors that donated the $16.4 million, they just pump money into an idea. They work with NGOs or governments to implement that idea, and then it trickles down to the beneficiaries. And beneficiaries is, you know, a word for like idle receiver, right? But what we're trying to do is flip this pyramid around. You know, we treat the beneficiaries as constituents because they have autonomy, they have agency, and they know what their needs are as well. So we start with them, we work with NGOs and governments, and then the donor. And there's a two-way arrow here because, you know, it's not a one-way relationship where the donor should just say, you know, what the local community might need. It should be a conversation and a partnership. So this is, you know, what we're trying to get at. So in this long-ass telephone line, there's a lot of misunderstanding and tension. I mean, in any bureaucracy, you can only imagine what kind of gaps and misunderstanding there are, and there is a lot of power dynamics at play. So especially right here, Washington and missions, this is where the relationship can get really sensitive, because think about Washington, D.C. folks marching into the mission and saying, hey, we have a development program for you guys. Here you go, implement it. That's kind of rude, right? The missions are the ones in the country, and they should know the context a lot better than DC folks, right? So oftentimes this is how it plays out. DC folks always, like every year, have a new program, and then we sort of, you know, put it on the laps of missions and expect it to be implemented like perfectly as they first planned it in our cubicles in DC. And so when we're working with them, we really have to be mindful of their situation as well. So the local organizations here, there's often two categories, very simply put. One is local organizations that have been working with USAID for a long time. They're kind of the usual suspects, so they know how the USAID paperwork and procedures work. They just are well versed in that. So they're sort of yes men though. They have become conditioned to USAID sort of imposing these parameters on development programs that they're just like, yeah, we'll implement that program, sure. And they don't ask questions. There's the second group of local organizations that are a lot newer to USAID. They probably haven't worked with them before, but they don't know their way around the paperwork, how the grants work. And if you're receiving grants from USAID, it's really a shit show to get all of the paperwork filed away. And for a local organization that's human capital strapped and just doesn't have a lot of time and resources, this is really hard. So we have to keep in mind of those parameters for local organizations. And then Congress, we have to keep them updated on where the funds are being used. We have to keep them happy, and we have to keep the local or the internal USAID people happy as well, because they're going to ask questions like, what's your program doing? Have you moved funds overseas, etc. Okay, so my job ranges from creating and implementing a communication strategy so that Congress and internal USAID folks are happy, but it also involves making sure that our development work is as user-centered as possible. And what that entails is finding ways to listen better. So for the Local Works program, we had 30 missions apply, so it's an application process. We read all 30 proposals, only selected these 4, Vietnam, Morocco, Malawi, and Serbia. I was just in Vietnam this February, and the goal is to work with a small cohort in the first round, because we're still testing this out, piloting it. And so it's just 4 for now, but right now we have been working with these missions. We made our first mission visits where we went over there to sort of kickstart the program, get to know each other, etc. But these visits can also be very sensitive as well, because usually USAID folks from Washington can march in there and kind of structure it like an audit, as if they're looking over the shoulders of missions and kind of checking on them and seeing if all the boxes are checked. So there's a sort of like rigid and structured format for these visits. And we really wanted to avoid that. So I put on a listening boot camp right here for the team, because we realized that we really need to be able to be good listeners ourselves before we go into these missions and build relationships with them. So for this listening boot camp, what I really wanted to address was the issue of my team being very binary about discussions. So, I'd be very surprised to, like last year when I first joined, I was surprised to hear brainstorming discussions go a little bit like this. Someone would suggest, hey, how about we try this and this? And another person, immediately after that person's finished, would say, no, absolutely not. That's not gonna work, Congress is gonna hate it, et cetera, et cetera. So you have this immediate shutting down of ideas, and what that creates is an environment of just shutting down and saying no to new ideas. And I'm sure Matt has emphasized this time and time again. If you don't get your shitty ideas out there, you're not going to get to the good ones, right? So I really wanted to bring this kind of RISD studio setting where we literally sit in a circle and share our prototypes and our solutions. People wouldn't say like, hey, your sphere sucks, or like, yours is ugly, or yours looks really good. We would just say, hey, that's cool, and share our ideas, literally put it on the table, and just look at it, and observe it, play with it. And it's a great example of the paper prototypes. So I even wrote a thought piece for my group, and it was about how to transform missions into design studios, because everyone's in a cubicle. They barely get out of their secure embassy compounds. It's a pretty hard environment to do real user research within the field. So I really wanted to bring that crit culture to my team and the missions. So we did a listening boot camp. This first activity was forbidden phrases, where our team can unconsciously sometimes say things in a blame placing way, where we'll say, let's not waste time, or you ought to do this and this, or you seem to be this and this. So I really wanted to get my team to write these on the wall. They rarely do that and put it up for show. And then the second round, the team would go around and see these phrases and then write positive alternatives to it. So instead of let's not waste time, let's think about it and regroup. We ought to, why don't we consider X? So this was a quick warm-up, and we did a mini crit sessions or critique session where I showed this photo of Madonna in Malawi as this is a typical example of like a white savior complex type of photo, otherwise known as poverty porn. And so I showed this and I was like, hey, let's first describe purely the objective observations, right? What medium is this? Is it photograph? What composition is it? What's the contrast like, etc. And this was, you would think that's easy because I'm sure you guys do this every time with your projects in class, but for federal agents, this doesn't come easily. One colleague, blurted out, this is absolutely offensive, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, whoa, calm down, we're doing objective observations. So this was really a habit to get into. And the second part, we got the colleagues to talk about their, how they thought the artist was conveying this message and how the artistic elements really helped with that. So it was a little more subjective analysis. So that was a fun crit time, and people said that this was great, especially because A, they were learning how to observe without really coming to a judgment, and B, it was really interesting to see how differently people viewed this one photograph. And the second thing we did was role play, where I split the group into two. I gave them a scenario that looked like this, where team A, you're the Local Works DC team. Team B, you're the mission. And so we played the scenario of, if you visit the mission and the mission's pushed back because they have a cooked program, what do you do? And if you're the mission, how do you respond to that? So this was great because we were able to empathize with the other side and really put ourselves in their position. And people really got into character, and they left the conference room and then just to come back in and act like they're visiting a mission. So this was a really fun exercise for us. So surprisingly, the team loved this boot camp, and it worked really well. It helped shape our values as we went into the mission visits, and it really shaped how we structured them. There were some team members who were like, we need to ask these set of 30 questions and get all the answers right away. We really need to make record of that. But what we really wanted to do was keep things vague and keep things open and build a relationship with the team. So right now we're about 3/4 done with our mission visits. And as we speak, there's a team in Malawi right now meeting with the mission there. And it's great because, things are vague in the missions right now. And that's actually a good thing. We're not looking over their shoulders to see what they're doing and how. We're really giving missions space to do expansive user research and really find the needs that are most salient in their communities. We often jump to define the problem from the very beginning with our program. So we'll say, oh, education is a big issue in Uganda. That's going to be our issue. But we really wanted to step back from that and say, you know, education might not be the first issue. You know, how do kids go to school when they have worms in their stomach, right? So we really encourage missions to step back and do better problem identification. And you know, we're giving missions time and money to do user research and find these needs and wants. And this can actually be rare. Most programs may not give missions time and money. They might be like, hey, you need to move $2 million by the end of next year. Like, hurry up, move the money, and just implement this program, right? It can often become about how many mosquito nets we delivered, or how many vaccinations we had administered. And that purely quantitative approach really doesn't speak to, you know, whether those mosquito nets are being used in the right way. One study was done where an organization gave free mosquito nets to a community in sub-Saharan Africa, and later on they realized that although they had distributed all their mosquito nets, the community members were using them as fishing nets. So that's sort of the divide there. Whew. Are we good on time? Okay, so some unsolicited tips for being a design evangelist. Is anyone, quick show of hands, is anyone sort of going or thinking about going into industries where like designers aren't the norm? Like they're like, who are you? Anyone? Oh great, that's a big number. What are you guys thinking about? Just curious.
I want to go back and work with the Indian government and work on education policy and bring like design.
Yeah, awesome, great. Anyone else? Policy, yeah. In what area?
Well, I want to run for office eventually, so.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that area.
Nice. Okay. Like congresswoman or president?
Governor.
Governor?
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll vote for you. Anyone else?
I'm working in academia right now. I'm trying to like inject more design into
Yeah.
the process.
Okay. Great. So you guys might already be familiar with these tips, but you know, first tip is be subtle about your intentions. You can't just go into government and say, hey, heard about design thinking or the design process? Well, I'm going to bring it to this agency and completely change everything. You're going to get a lot of this, Liz Lemon mentioned. So number 2, don't introduce yourself as a designer. I made this mistake and I got emails like this, titled favor. Can you please do us a favor? We have to do an invite for the Deputy Administrator farewell and welcoming party on June 14th. We would like to send it out to E3 early next week. If I get you text by tomorrow, can you guys spend an hour to jazz it up visually? We hope to get it to blank to look at Monday morning. It was really hard to deal with, but I didn't do anything for that. So be careful. Don't advertise that you're a designer because, you know, granted, people who don't really understand design are gonna come and say, hey, can you do this luncheon or brown bag party, like poster or whatever. And I have the utmost respect for poster design. It's just that in this case, it's not good. And number 3, be patient. I used to be so frustrated that people would think designers are just people who make things pretty. And I got angry when someone said, hey, can you make this look good? And I was like, no, that's not good. But I realized slowly, like, it makes sense that they don't magically know everything about the design process and the potential of design. I mean, they didn't go to design school, they didn't take this awesome program at MIT with Cressy. It's obvious that they don't know the true value of designers. So be patient. This is an opportunity to share your views on design, and you are a design evangelist. And sometimes, you know, you'll feel like this hallway of broken chairs. This is real in my office in the basement. Or you might feel like an endless beige carpeted hallway, but worry not. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Number 4, start small. You can't suddenly conjure up a design congregation in government, and don't be sad if design principles aren't institutionalized by the end of the year. Instead, work on your own shit in your little corner, in your office, and do it really well. Others will notice. Unsolicited tip number 4, or number 5, know the jargon, but never ever use it. In my team, I'm often the last person where the copy comes through for us to do any kind of like outgoing material. So I make sure that anything we get, text-wise, someone on the streets can read it. And we've actually had people come up to us and tell us that they enjoyed reading our 20-page program document. So, you know, there's a bit of a triumph there. And you know, you might think that in government, you know, it's all about technical, dry language. You have to sound like you have a PhD, but that's really not true. People are so sick of run-on sentences and, you know, really convoluted sentences. So just, you know, talk like a normal person. And so just for fun, these are the acronyms that I hear every single day. Yeah, just take a hard look at that. And don't ask me what they are. Number 6, show rather than tell. I've talked a little bit about this before, but it's really important to show rather than tell, especially in government, because new ideas are often seen as a threat. You know, new people come in and you're like, oh shit, I don't want to lose my job. Or, you know, new ideas are brought to the table and they're like, no, we should do it the way it always was. But, you know, if you mock, like, when I have a new idea, I always mock something up, or, you know, make my team mock something up and write things on the wall. We've encouraged them to, you know, use idea cards, word association. This was actually for our naming of the program. A little secret, in our legislation, our program is technically called the Small Grants Program, which is an acronym is SGP. In our team, we have a program called Small Grants Program already, and that's for a totally different thing. So we really needed to change the name, but just a little secret, we're trying to go with Local Works from now on. And so, you know, this was our little naming workshop. We did downvoting and got people to look at words and come up with new ideas. So we've really been trying to push for these kind of you know, post-it activities and the habit of putting things on the wall and sharing it. Number 7, embed yourself in the system. If you're, you know, some of you guys who put up your hands, you probably know this well, but I used to try to, you know, cold call government agencies and said like, hey, do you guys have like any work in the design and like design and international development sector, or, you know, is there any design thinking institutionalized in your agency? Like, can I be there? I've done that before, and it's really hard. Like, people think you're crazy. They're like, you know, what is this designer trying to do, right? So being within USAID, like, I never thought I would work in a government agency, right? I went to RISD. I thought, you know, I wanted to do social design, but I didn't know that I would be in the Ronald Reagan building in DC. But what I realized is that if I hadn't been embedded in this bureaucracy that is so majestic and interesting to look at, I wouldn't have been able to identify the pockets and niche areas where design was really needed. I wouldn't have been able to identify in my team that, hey, listening is actually the problem. It's not about something else. It's really about how do we listen to ourselves, how do we communicate better, and how do we transfer that over to the overseas missions. So yeah, if you're trying to do anything, I, at least from experience, really believe that it's easier to be within the bureaucratic system that you're trying to change. Anyone know Seth Godin? Yes? Oh, he's like a designer, author, like thought leader, and he has these blog posts that he puts out every year or every week or so. And one of them was about treating your job as a project. And he had a 30-year career, and he saw them as a series of projects. And that was really interesting to me. And I realized that that really is appropriate for the work I'm doing right now. Because I've treated my job at USAID as a project and not like a job or career, I've been able to maintain a really healthy distance from it. It's really easy to get sucked in the bureaucracy and the procedures and politics, But because I treat the work I do as a project, I've been able to see the big picture mechanics of the bureaucracy, and it's been a really, really good thing. So I would really recommend, maintain a healthy distance. So my dream is for people to understand that design isn't just about jazzing things up visually. And I'm sure many of you guys say that same view. But one of my fantasies is to see more designers in positions of power so that the laws and policies that govern society are user-centered and actually make sense in real life. So you back there who wanted to run for office, thank you, because that's awesome. And imagine, for example, that if a congressman or woman did some expansive user research to gather relevant information before drafting their bill, imagine how an anti-abortion bill would look like. How does line 257 in this bill play out in real life, and how does it affect an unemployed young woman's life, right? I really believe that designers have a huge role to play within the realm of global and domestic issues, and I really believe we have the right skills to solve them. So thank you, tweet me, email me, visit me, and I'll take questions now. Thanks. It's so hot. Anyone? Yes.
Yeah, I think it's interesting for the social one to ask for the user needs, because some people will say, oh, I want this. Some other people will say, no, I don't want that.
Yeah.
So then you ask those users, and then you create something for the majority. Then the minority will say, that's not
Right.
what I need. So how do you deal with that? Because that's like you ask user needs, and then you do exactly what they don't want.
So they.
It's not like a product, right? So I
Yeah.
ask for the needs, and I don't care about what you don't need. And you might create a product that you don't need, you just don't buy it. But for the social one, you create a product that some people don't need, and some people actually hate it. They
Right.
don't want it.
Right.
Now, how do you deal with those, like a minority portion of it?
So social design, you're saying that the products that comes out of social design isn't really for everyone, right? The
Right.
majority, right?
Right.
So I think that's the point. I mean, you have the majority market that caters to able-bodied people with a middle income, right? Or something along those lines. So I think social design emerged because there were the 90-something% of the global population that was living on $2 a day. And people saw that as, they're just poor people who only have $2 a day, right? But there are some people, leaders like Paul Pollack or Jacqueline Novogratz, who saw these people and they said, they have $2 a day. They have purchasing power. It's not a lot, but they have it. If you multiply $1 by 6 billion, right? It's an enormous market. So I think it came out of that, where they saw this marginalized population as an opportunity. And I don't know if that answered your question. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
So there are a lot of American companies doing social work, like the Foundation. You mentioned Jacqueline Novogratz from Acumen.
Yeah.
In USA, who do you look to in this area for best practices in design thinking in the social world?
Yeah.
And whether it's like structure, organization, or culture, what are they doing differently from USA?
Right. No, that's a great question. We're very open to ideas from very different fields. And just recently, we actually did a co-creation workshop where we invited about 30 different companies and organizations within the development space, but we actually had a couple design firms come and co-create with other people in different areas of development. And we came up with really great concepts on how to do listening better, how to do locally owned and led development better. So we sort of learned from other practitioners in that way. It's funny you mentioned best practices because we actually kind of don't really want to look at best practices just because oftentimes that is a sort of one-size-fits solution for this problem that may be really different from other problems. So instead of best practices, we really look at principles and values of development, where we look at organizations that do community-based development, or they really work with local constituents and organizations from the get-go, not just at the end as consultation, but from the very beginning. So, yeah. So if you guys have any ideas on, how to do development better from your angle, like, let me know, because we're always looking to collaborate with different people. Yeah. Yep. Governor.
Right.
It's not the first time she's been called that.
President.
Governor.
Yeah, so for your immediate next step after college, how did you determine that you wanted you went straight to USA, right?
I was at a startup in San Francisco and then USA.
And then I was like, okay. So can you describe your process?
Like from graduation to
Yeah.
now? So basically, how did I get into USAID and get
And do you picture
hooked up
yourself there
with
for the?
Right. No, that's a great life question that I think about every day before I go to bed.
Right.
But I actually did a research project in Uganda during my junior year, and it was about hearing the African community's perspective on development. Did they like Western aid and how they were doing it, or did they think, they could do it better? And I was doing that research in a few different cities there, and I actually just cold emailed USAID on their website, and just emailed someone random, and then they emailed me back after 2 weeks. I really didn't expect anything. And then that person, they heard about, I explained my little, design evangelist, speech, and she forwarded me to another person who did the same, who forwarded me to another person, kind of went on for several people, and then I got connected with someone named Tom Carter, who is now my boss. So it was kind of a very serendipitous connection, but the research I was doing, thankfully, fit exactly with this program called Local Works that I'm working on. So yeah, a lot of serendipity, but also I had been really just digging for the answer, or how can I be useful in this design learning industry? And yeah, I just dug and something came up. But yeah, it could be a lot more long-winded for other people. Yeah. Anyone else? Yep.
So it was really cool that everybody really liked the listening booth,
Right.
for example. But I could imagine it being very difficult. I mean, the design process, especially with iteration and people
Right.
getting attached to the things that they're coming up with,
Yeah,
can
yeah.
be really hard on people, especially if it's not something that they're familiar with, or
Right.
a process they're excited about.
Right.
So how do you mitigate that? How do you prepare people for that when you're teaching them about design?
Right. No, that's a really good question. So, one of the things I do is I keep butting into conversations, and I say, hey, don't worry about that. We're gonna come back to your idea. And I facilitate these workshops that are done in the whole design studio fashion. So I've sort of from the beginning, very slowly but surely, have kind of accustomed my team to those processes. But this program, this Local Works program, is actually, we have 5 principles that we do our work by, and one of them is embrace risk, and what's the last part? Embrace risk and embrace failure, or something like that. And not everyone, but a good number in our team have taken that in, and we're still early in our process, so who knows, people might say with their mouths, yeah, we're doing this iterative process for development programs. But down the line, that, it might run into people's values, and we might come to a roadblock. But, that's why, since last year, I've really been pushing, doing the whole subtle with your intentions thing, and really kind of slipping in, design principles, but using their language, right? there is a lot of analogous language from the development sector that really does correspond to design. Like constituent feedback is a thing in development. That's basically user feedback, right? Yeah. Good question. Anyone else? Yes.
I have another one.
Yeah,
Is,
yeah.
no worries. Just because you're doing something different, creating a different culture within a much larger bureaucracy and structure, how do you see, how is that, your new culture interacting with the existing culture?
Yeah, no, that's really good. We were actually kind of on the down low last year when we were launching our program. And I first started working with my group only, and I didn't really care about the rest of the agency, because really I needed a proof of concept of sorts to really prove that, hey, like the design process is actually makes sense for development. So I started there first, and then other people started to notice. We did our launch party last year in May. Yeah, like literally one person came up to us and was like, you know, I love how, like, I read everything on your program document, and this is a really great program. And you know, we concentrated on our own work that like people just kind of came to us. And so that's kind of our strategy going forward. We don't really want to like advertise it outwardly that we're doing this like awesome, innovative thing, because people might roll their eyes, like Liz Lemon back there. So we're really trying to take a subtle approach. And it's really slow, right? It's gonna, like, I might go to grad school next year. Like, it's gonna, like, this is gonna go long beyond my time, probably. Yeah. Yes.
So in brief, we talked a lot about continuous iteration.
Yes.
Building fast, break them, and
Yeah.
what needs to be done. Do you have any examples of active production projects that that seemed like a good idea?
Yeah.
They failed in the field.
Yeah.
And then they were sort of like set up to come.
Well, that's a great question. There are a lot of those examples in the whole like product design for development space, like the Life Straw or the One Laptop for Child, whose headquarters are based right here. But within our team, we really learned from our previous examples. A lot of our teammates had been foreign service officers in different countries. But one of the things was when we did our application process and we kind of gave the guidance to missions on how to apply, you know, we were like, our program was all about not jumping to a specific sector and defining the parameters so early, right? But the questions on our application included things like, what is your development hypothesis? You know, who are your end users? And we were really like asking these questions that were contradictory to our approach. So a lot of the proposals we got were things like, you know, we think the governance issue in Angola is very important, and so we're gonna work towards educating the citizens so that the government can be more responsive to citizens' issues. So they like already had a project brief ready to go, right? But that was our fault. So this second time around, we're gonna launch our new application in the fall of this year. So we're completely revamping it, not asking those like specific questions, but we're saying, you know, if you were given time and money to do this user research in this country, like what would you do with it, right? So we're making it a lot more open-ended. Yeah, so that's one example where we're like, yeah, we failed on our first application process, but we're admitting that. Like on the newsletter, we're like, we're really sorry. This is very contradictory. So we admitted that first thing. Nobody admits that they failed, honestly, especially in government, because their asses are on the line, especially if you are a foreign service officer and you need to like go at the ranks, right? So, you know, we admitted our mistake and then we said, give us some feedback, and we've been completely revamping that. Yeah. Anyone else? Time?
All right.
Yay.
Well, thank you so much, Leah.
Thank you.
It was awesome.
Thanks, guys.
So we have a tradition of taking a group photograph.
Yeah.
All right. So you guys, let's just do that for the second time today. And